Sicinnus rose across black water in the middle of the night. No armor on his body, no weapon in his hand. Ahead of him, torches lined the horizon, as many as 800 Persian ships strung out across the strait like a wall of fire. He's rowing straight toward them. He's a slave, and the message in his head belongs to his master, a man named Themistocles. If the message works, it stops the largest invasion force the ancient world has ever built. If it doesn't, Sicinnus is dead before the sun comes up. He keeps rowing. 3 weeks earlier, Xerxes burned Athens to the ground. The king of Persia had crossed into Europe on 2 bridges of boats lashed together across the Hellespont, leading an army so large that ancient writers couldn't agree on how to count it. He'd already crushed the Spartans at Thermopylae, and now his army controlled most of Greece. Athens had been evacuated before he arrived, the whole city emptied onto ships and sent to safety, so what Xerxes captured was an empty shell, and he burned it anyway. The only thing standing in his way now was a fleet of Greek ships hiding in the strait, next to a small island called Salamis. Persia had somewhere between 600 and 800 warships. Greece had fewer than 400. The Greek commanders, men from a dozen different cities who barely trusted each other, were arguing about what to do next. Most of them wanted to run, pull back to the Peloponnese, dig in behind a wall and hope Persia lost interest. Themistocles, the Athenian in charge of the largest chunk of the fleet, thought that was suicide. Open water favored Persian numbers. The narrow strait at Salamis didn't. The Corinthian commander told him flat out that he had no right to an opinion, since Athens didn't even have a city left to defend. Themistocles shot back that without his 200 Athenian ships, there was no Greek fleet at all, and that, if the others abandoned Salamis, the Athenians would simply sail away and start a new city somewhere else. He lost the argument anyway, and the vote went against him. That's when Themistocles did something nobody in that war room saw coming. He sent his own household slave, a man trusted enough to raise his children, across the strait to the Persian camp. Sicinnus's orders were simple. Find Xerxes, say the Greek alliance is falling apart, report that some commanders are already sailing home, add that Themistocles is ready to switch sides if the fleet moves fast enough to catch the Greeks before they scatter. Xerxes had already heard whispers that the Greeks were divided, and here was a Greek commander confirming it. He never checked the story because there was no need. It confirmed exactly what he already believed, that Greece was beaten and didn't know it yet. He gave the order immediately: move the fleet into the strait tonight, seal both exits before the Greeks escape, catch them fleeing in the dark, and finish this before breakfast. 800 ships turned toward Salamis in the middle of the night, and rowers who'd already put in a full day's work pulled through the darkness, straining to close the trap before sunrise. Some of those crews had been at the oars since dawn the day before. Xerxes even sent 400 men to seize a small island in the middle of the strait so his soldiers could finish off any Greek sailor who washed up alive. The Greek fleet did something else entirely. Instead of scattering or running, they loaded their ships, took their positions, and waited for morning, because Themistocles had never planned to flee at all. Xerxes had his throne carried to a hilltop overlooking the strait so he could watch the massacre up close, and he brought scribes along to record which of his men fought well. He was that confident. Here's the part that makes this insane. The message wasn't actually a lie. The Greek alliance really was collapsing, and Themistocles turned his own failure into the trap that would decide the war. If you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story we cover every week. Back to the strait, because dawn is coming and Xerxes has no idea what's about to hit him. At dawn, the Persian fleet rode into the strait, expecting an empty sea and fleeing ships. What they found instead was a wall of 370 Greek triremes sitting in tight formation, completely ready. It was already too late to turn back. 800 ships were packed into a channel barely a mile wide, stacked 3 and 4 deep with nowhere to maneuver. In open water, Persian numbers would have crushed the Greeks in an hour. In that strait, those same numbers turned into a trap. Ships collided with their own allies. Rowers backed into friendly hulls. The Phoenician squadron, meant to lead the attack, got so tightly packed that its own ships couldn't row forward without striking each other. The formation built to overwhelm Greece from every direction couldn't even turn around. The Greek triremes went to work. Faster, lighter, and built for exactly this kind of fighting, they picked their targets and rammed, bow first, straight into the side of a Persian hull, then pulled back before the enemy could board. One ship went down, then another, then the ship behind it, trapped by its own fleet with nowhere to go. Each kill took seconds, and each opening in the Persian line let 2 more Greek ships through. Xerxes watched from his hilltop, and what he saw stopped making sense. His navy wasn't losing ground, it was destroying itself. Persian sailors, most of whom couldn't swim, went into the water by the hundreds, weighed down by armor they couldn't shed fast enough. The playwright Aeschylus, who fought in the battle himself, later wrote that the Greeks moved through the wreckage like fishermen hauling in a net, and that the screaming didn't stop until the water went quiet. Only one commander in that entire Persian fleet had warned Xerxes not to fight here. Her name was Artemisia, a queen from Halicarnassus, and days earlier she'd told him the Greeks were stronger at sea, and that Salamis was the wrong place to prove otherwise. Xerxes ignored her. Now, watching his fleet collapse from his throne on the hilltop, he was finding out exactly how right she'd been. By early evening, Xerxes had lost roughly 200 ships, and Artemisia had been right about all of it. If you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story we cover every week. Back to the Strait, because the battle wasn't finished. By the time the fighting stopped, the Strait at Salamis was full of wreckage and bodies. The Greeks lost fewer than 40 ships. Persia lost close to 300, and because most of the drowned couldn't swim, the death toll on the Persian side was far worse than the ship count alone suggests. Whole crews went under in armor, weighed down by their own gear, in water that had been clear that morning. Along the beaches, Greek hoplites waited to finish off any Persian sailor who made it to shore alive, including the 400 soldiers Xerxes had sent to that little island the night before, expecting an easy massacre of their own. Xerxes didn't stay to watch the cleanup. He'd come to Greece expecting a short campaign and a total victory. Instead, he was sitting on a hill watching the most powerful navy on earth get torn apart by a fleet less than half its size, in a channel every one of his commanders, except one queen, had told him not to enter. He called for Mardonius and Artemisia and asked them both the same question. What happens now? He still had his army, and that part hadn't been touched. But an army needs supplies, and supplies come by sea, and the sea now belonged to Greece. Within days, Xerxes made the decision that ended his invasion. He took the bulk of his forces and marched home to Asia, leaving a smaller army behind under Mardonius to try to finish the job the following year. They didn't finish it. The following spring, that remaining Persian force was crushed on land at Plataea, and the invasion that started with Xerxes crossing into Europe with the largest army the world had ever seen ended with nothing to show for it. None of that happens without one night, one message, and one man rowing across black water toward 800 torches with nothing but a story in his mouth. A story that was half true, aimed at exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment. After the battle, Themistocles didn't forget who carried the message that started it all. Sicinnus, the slave who rowed alone into the middle of the Persian fleet, with nothing to protect him but a story, was given his freedom and made a citizen of Thespiae. He walked away from Salamis a free man in a country that had nearly stopped existing the week before. Xerxes went back to Persia and never set foot in Greece again. Artemisia, the one commander who told the truth and got ignored for it, survived the entire war exactly the way she predicted the Greeks would, by being sharper than everyone else in the room. Sicinnus made it across that water in the dark. Whatever was waiting for him on the other side, it was worth the risk. I'm Zombo. If you made it this far, you're already part of the quest. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.